Before we even start this video, let me just tell you that, yeah, I know what this looks like. I'm trying to compare a rear-wheel drive two-door coupe with a four-door, four-wheel drive hot hatchback. Not to mention that this has a 3-liter inline-six turbocharged petrol engine capable of producing 370 horsepower, while that one in the back has a 2-liter, 4-cylinder turbocharged engine that produces 310. But since the wonderful people at Volkswagen Sweden gave us this awesome Golf R to test for 5 days, and I already had this one in the garage, I figured, why not? But to be completely fair, that's not the only reason why I decided to put these two together. The main reason is that I'm actually thinking about replacing my BMW M2 next year with a Golf R. Next year I'm planning to buy an old BMW as a project car and build on it. And because of that I have to sell the M2 in order to have some budget to start with. And the reason why I'm considering the R as a replacement for the M2 is because it's cheaper, it's more comfortable, and they're pretty similar performance-wise. And in today's video, we're gonna have a look at 3 things regarding these two cars. We're gonna have an overview of the design of the cars, we're gonna have a look at the interior and the quality of the materials on the inside, and then obviously we're gonna see how they both drive. But now, let's have a look at the design of the two cars. So, the exterior design. Both of them are top-of-the-line cars in their respective model range. The R is the top-of-the-line Golf, while the M2 is the top-of-the-line 2 Series. The Golf is a bit more tame design-wise compared to the M2. It has a more sportier bumper design, bigger intakes, and a tweaked grille. Golf Rs don't have fog lights, and you can tell them apart from GTIs by the gloss black exterior trim and by the fact that it sits a bit lower. And finally we have quad exhaust on a 2-liter engine, 19-inch Pretoria wheels in gloss black. I love this, and this particular car has the optional and must-have, in my opinion, a Krapovic exhaust, a factory option. The M2 however is a bit more extreme, because underneath this car is basically an M4. So the body had to be widened, and BMW did so by fitting these gorgeous flared arches. And that makes the M2 63mm wider at the front and 69 at the back compared to the standard 2 Series. Then we have a sportier M-style front bumper, a rear diffuser that houses a quad exhaust system, and a small boot spoiler. The wheels are 19-inch, they come as standard, and they're the only alloy option on the M2. And because this is a rear-wheel drive M car, the back tires are wider than the front ones. On the inside, things are pretty similar. Both cars have leather seats, both have sportier steering wheels, both have touchscreen navigation systems, 2-zone climate control, but there are, however, a few key differences between the two. First off, the Golf is packed with much more tech than the M2 is. Take the instrument cluster, for example, which is fully digital, and you can even have the map in between the rev counter and the speedometer. And it comes as standard in the new Golf R. Then, this car is also equipped with radar-guided cruise control, which I find highly useful, especially in rush hour traffic or on highways. And unfortunately, that cannot be spec'd on the M2 and not even on the M2 competition. And the last two notable differences between the cars are the fact that this one has an automatic transmission, my M2 has the manual, this has the electronic handbrake or finger brake, whatever you want to call it, while the M2 has the regular mechanical one. Let's jump into the M2. So, the all familiar M2 interior, and right off the bat, I kind of have to say that this interior feels cheaper than the Golfs, but it's just a perception thing because the quality of the materials on the inside of the BMW and the Golf are pretty much identical. However, I like the sitting position better in the M2 because you sit lower in the car. It's not ideal, however. I would love if you could go like an inch lower in this car, that will be the perfect driving position. But anyway, materials, quality of the build, basically identical on both cars. Now, the first thing I want to point out on the M2 interior is the fact that even though people think otherwise, the instrument cluster in the M2 is not digital. It may look like it is, but it's actually just a regular one that has an LED backlight, and from some angles it might not look like an analog instrument cluster, but trust me, it is. Let's see what else. Well, we have the infotainment system. That's basically a touchscreen just like in the Golf, and unlike the Volkswagen, you can also control it from this rotary wheel down here. Plus you also get shortcuts to the major features that this infotainment system has. And furthermore, you also have these 8 buttons here below the infotainment screen, which you can use for 8 more extra shortcuts for various features on the infotainment system. Highly useful stuff if you ask me, and you can only find this feature on BMWs. This car is a manual, 3 pedals, and the mechanical handbrake, like I previously mentioned. But otherwise, I think it's about time to drive these cars. Come on, Mr. BMW! You can't really get away from me that easy. I'm actually really surprised how close I can keep up with the M2. That definitely has to do with my really awesome driving skills, not with the fact that this is an automatic and 4-wheel drive and the M2 is a manual rear-wheel drive. No, that has nothing to do with it, obviously. So as you've probably seen by now, I'm in a Golf R, and first let's start out with the numbers. This has a 2-liter turbocharged petrol engine at the front, 310 horsepower, 400 Newton meters of torque, and it can reach 100 kilometers per hour from standstill in 4.6 seconds with the DSG box. Yeah, and this box is the new 7-speed wet clutch DSG transmission, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's got lightning fast upshifts, lightning fast downshifts. It's really smooth around town. I really can't say anything bad about it. It's really good. And this transmission combined with that engine, oh my god, what a perfect pairing this is. I think in this Golf R I actually prefer the automatic rather than the manual, actually, because you also get those cracks on the upshifts. And I don't know, but it feels like you can better explore the possibilities of this engine. It pulls really well from anything about 1800 RPM, and it just revs out to 6500 RPM. It's a really powerful engine. I have to tell you that driving behind that M2 doesn't really help the case of this R, because all I can hear is the exhaust from the BMW actually. But power-wise, I don't think the BMW has a lot in it, to be honest with you. But yeah, this is a lovely machine. The steering is bang on, the suspension keeps the car planted on the road, and this engine's got plenty of grunt you can exploit. It's a really wonderful package, this Golf R. It really is. But right about now, I'm kind of curious to see how the M2 feels like immediately after jumping out of this one. So let's check it out. As soon as you start driving the M2, after jumping out of the R, you immediately notice that things are quite different in here. The M2 is less refined, less comfortable, and harder to drive because of the manual transmission in the middle. The M2 feels like a more focused car, more precise when driving fast, and it feels a bit more special than the R, to be honest. The M2 has a 3-liter 6-cylinder 370 horsepower engine at the front, drive goes to the rear wheels, and as standard you get a 6-speed manual transmission. And because of that, it's just 0.1 second faster to 100 km per hour than the Golf R is. But also because the R can put the power down better because of the 4Motion all-wheel drive system and because of the excellent 7-speed DSG transmission. And I bet you that if we could have had a drag race between the two cars as they are spec'd right now, the Golf R would be faster to 100 km per hour because of the stuff I previously mentioned and because it also has a quite excellent launch control system. But that being said, the BMW M2 is definitely the most fun car to drive out of the two. Because as soon as you floor the throttle, the back end comes into play, and I just love that. Every single time you drive this one like you stole it, it lets you know it's a rear-wheel driven car. And that's a feeling that not a lot of cars can give you, no matter how powerful or how many sophisticated systems they have on board. And even though the Golf R can keep up with this M2 quite easily around corners, as soon as you start to wind up this engine, the extra 60 horsepower and 100 Newton meters of torque will start to make a difference. But around these particular twisty roads that I'm driving on today, I actually prefer the Golf R's suspension. I feel that VW's dampers can handle bumpy roads much better than the M2's can. The R just feels more planted on the road and more composed, as opposed to how the M2 feels on a bumpy B road. The M2 feels jumpy most of the time. I mean, as soon as I approach a corner and there's bumps in the road surface, the back end of the M2 starts to jump immediately and the car just feels less predictable in that moment. And I don't know, it just takes a bit away from the confidence that you would have on a track, for example, where the road surface is perfectly smooth. But I do think that the M2 steering is far superior to the Golf's. It's more communicative, it's more precise, and it's more weighty, actually. Plus, I personally like the fact that the steering wheel is a bit thicker in the M2.
So what's my take on these two cars head to head? It's quite simple actually. If you want a fast and great handling car that can easily transform into a perfect daily driver by pressing the comfort button, then the Golf R has to be your choice. It does all of that so well. It's fast, it's practical, it has 4 doors, it's really comfortable, and it's quiet when you need it to be. But if you're looking for something that's a bit more special, a bit more focused on the driving aspect, and you don't really mind if that means you're going to sacrifice comfort and practicality, then buy the M2.
So there you go, guys. This has been my first ever versus video. I've had so much fun filming these two cars. They're really, really awesome, both of them in their own ways. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe to Cartoon for lots more videos to come. And until next time, take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you around.